I'm 23 years old. I live alone in a small apartment just outside the city. It's not much, but it's mine. I work a normal job, I have a few close friends, and up until that night, I never really thought about how vulnerable I was. I had been single for a while, focusing on work and myself. But Valentine's Day was coming up, and I don't know, I guess I just felt like trying something new. So when a guy I had been chatting with asked me out, I said yes, and that was the biggest mistake of my life. His name was Daniel. We met on a dating app, and at first he seemed perfect. Smart, funny, polite, the kind of guy who knows how to make conversation flow effortlessly. He picked a nice restaurant, not too fancy but intimate. I arrived a little early, feeling that mix of nerves and excitement. When he walked in, I remember thinking, he looked even better in person. At first, everything was great. We talked about our favorite movies, our jobs, even joked about terrible first dates we'd had in the past. I actually started thinking maybe this is going somewhere. But then, something changed. It happened when we started talking about childhood memories. I was telling him a funny story from when I was little, and he was listening, too closely. Then, mid-conversation, he leaned in slightly and said something that sent a chill down my spine. "I think I know what you look like when you sleep." I laughed awkwardly, assuming it was a joke, but he didn't laugh back, he just smiled. And that was when I knew something was off. After that, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I checked my phone under the table, pretending to be distracted, then told him I wasn't feeling well and needed to leave early. He didn't argue, he just watched me, smiling. I left quickly, walking down the sidewalk, trying to shake off the unease. But after a few minutes, I realized something. I wasn't alone. At first, I told myself it was just a coincidence, but every time I turned a corner I felt it, that prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I risked a glance behind me, and there he was. Not running, not calling out, just walking. Slowly, like he had all the time in the world. That's when the fear really kicked in. I made it to my apartment, heart pounding. I locked the door behind me, pressed my back against it, and exhaled. I was safe, or so I thought, until I heard it. The soft scraping sound, metal against metal, the doorknob jiggling. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police, when suddenly, the door clicked open. I never forgot the sound of my own door unlocking when I was the only one inside. I ran to my bedroom and locked myself in. My heart was pounding so loudly I thought he could hear it. Then, footsteps, slow, deliberate. I had to do something. I grabbed my bedside lamp, the only thing I could use as a weapon. Then I remembered, the kitchen, the knife block. I crept toward the door, listening. Then I heard something that made my stomach drop. A drawer opening, the sound of metal scraping. He was in my kitchen, and he had just taken something. I don't know if I screamed, I don't remember calling the police, but I must have, because suddenly there were sirens. By the time they got inside, the apartment was empty. The front door was still locked from the inside. The only sign that anyone had been there was the missing knife. They never found him. No fingerprints, no evidence, nothing. But sometimes when I'm alone at night, I still hear it. The sound of my doorknob turning. Valentine's Day was supposed to be perfect, and honestly, at first, it was. I was out with my boyfriend, Jake. We had been together for almost a year, and this was our first real Valentine's date. A nice dinner, good conversation, lots of laughs. It felt safe, like a night we'd always remember. And I do remember it, but not for the reasons I expected. The dinner went great. We paid the bill, left the restaurant, and stepped outside into the cold night air. And that's when I noticed him. A man, standing just outside the restaurant, staring at us. I wouldn't have thought much of it, except he wasn't dressed for the night. No coat, no hat, just a dark hoodie pulled up too far over his face. At first I thought maybe he was waiting for someone, but as we started walking, he started walking too. At first I told myself I was imagining things. It was a busy area, people were everywhere, but after a few blocks the crowd thinned out. And he was still there. Same distance, same pace, never looking away. I grabbed Jake's arm and whispered, That guy has been behind us since the restaurant. Jake didn't react right away, but I saw his shoulders stiffen. He kept his voice calm. Let's test something. We turned left down a side street, then right again. A full circle, no one else was around, but when we came back to the main road, he was still there. Jake squeezed my hand. Okay, he's following us. Panic started to set in, but Jake, he stayed calm. Listen to me, he said, keeping his voice even. We don't go home, we don't act scared, and we don't let him know we know. I nodded, but my hands were shaking. Jake took out his phone, texting something quickly. Then he whispered, "We're walking into that store up ahead. Act normal." We stepped inside. The warmth of the store should have felt comforting, but it didn't. I could feel the weight of that man's stare, even from outside. Jake led me down one of the aisles, pretending to browse, but I could see him watching the glass door. Then, just as I was about to ask what he was doing, Jake's entire body tensed. The man was standing outside, looking right at us through the glass. Jake didn't hesitate. He walked straight to the counter and said to the cashier, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Hey, can we wait here? There's a guy outside who's been following us." The cashier, an older man, barely even looked up. "You mean the guy in the hoodie?" I felt sick. "You've seen him before?" He nodded. "Yeah, he's been hanging around all week, watching people." That's when Jake did the smartest thing he could have done. He turned, looked directly at the man outside, and raised his phone like he was taking a picture. The moment Jake did that, the man turned and walked away. Not fast, not running, just leaving. Like he knew the game was over. Jake kept his arm around me as we watched him disappear down the street. The cashier muttered, "You did the right thing. Creeps like that, they hate being noticed." We waited in that store for 20 minutes before finally calling a cab. I never saw the man again, but to this day, I still wonder, what would have happened if Jake hadn't noticed him first? Valentine's Day, a night for love, for romance, for promises that don't always last. I should have been heartbroken that night, but instead I was terrified. Because while I thought I was just going home alone after a breakup, I was actually walking into something much, much worse. Leo and I had been together for almost 2 years, but for months things had been falling apart. That night over dinner, we finally ended it. It wasn't loud, no yelling, just quiet. Like we both knew there was nothing left to fight for. I got up, grabbed my coat, and left. He didn't try to stop me. I expected to feel relief. Instead, I just felt cold. I was about 10 minutes from home when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Leo. "Are you home?" I frowned. He had barely looked at me when I left. Why was he texting me now? I didn't respond. A minute later, another message. "I can see you." I stopped walking, my heart pounding. I turned around, scanning the empty street. Nothing. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe he was just being petty. Maybe he regretted breaking up. Then another text. "Turn around." I practically ran the rest of the way to my apartment. My hands were shaking as I fumbled with the keys. The second I got inside, I locked the door and leaned against it, trying to breathe. I pulled out my phone, ready to call Leo to demand what the hell he was doing. But before I could, another message. "Let me in." I froze. A soft tapping sound echoed from my front door. I backed away slowly. My entire body was screaming at me to run, but run where? The doorknob started to turn. I grabbed the closest thing to me, a lamp, and whispered, "Leo, stop it." Then, a new text. "Leo doesn't have his phone right now." My stomach dropped. I tried calling Leo, but it went straight to voicemail. Then I saw my apartment door move inward slightly. The lock was holding, but whoever was outside, they were strong. Then footsteps, but not just one set, more than one person. Then, out of nowhere, a loud bang against the door. I screamed, thinking whoever was outside had finally forced their way in. But then, I heard a voice. "Olivia, it's me, open up." It was Leo. I yanked open the door, and behind Leo stood 2 of his friends. And on the ground between them, pinned down, was a man I had never seen before. He was struggling, panting, a burner phone clutched in his fingers. Leo's friend looked up at me. "He stole Leo's phone from the restaurant. We tracked it here." The police came, they arrested him, but the worst part? The texts, the footsteps, the break-in attempt. He admitted to all of it. He had been watching me at the restaurant, he followed me home, and when he found Leo's phone unattended, he saw an opportunity to make me believe my own ex was coming after me.